Hi y'all, this is Mrs. D Math, and we're going to go through how to divide decimals today. Let's go ahead and get started. So our first step when we're dividing decimals is if we're dividing by a whole number, we're going to divide the numbers and then move the decimal in the quotient the same as the dividend. So let's talk about the parts of division real quick too. And we'll go ahead and start with this first example. Now, when we're dividing, we obviously want to set it up as if we have our division symbol here. So what it is we have the divisor, the dividend, and the quotient. So we know when we're dividing out numbers, the first number goes in the box and this number goes outside. So our dividend is the number inside the box. Our quotient is going to be the answer. And the other number in this situation is our divisor. Okay, so this time we have a whole number as the divisor. So 3 is our whole number. So we're not going to have to move any decimals as far as before we start dividing. So let's go ahead and divide these numbers. So 3 goes into 6 2 times, and we have 0 remaining. Then we're going to bring down our 3. 3 goes into 3 1 time, and we have 0 remaining. So we're going to bring down a 9. 3 goes into 9 3 times. Now I'm going to move my decimal in the quotient, which is my answer, the same as the dividend, which is the number inside the box. So here's my decimal. I'm just going to bring it straight up and keep it in the same place. So if you notice, I did keep everything lined up, which is very important when you're dividing. Everything has to stay in nice, even lines. A lot of times you can use graph paper or something where you have boxes that helps you keep that together. But 2 13/100 is going to be my answer. Let's try another example. So now I have my dividend and my divisor. So my dividend goes in the box, and I'm dividing by the divisor. So I can go ahead and divide. 12 goes into 12 1 time. I have 0 left over. I'm going to bring down a 4. 12 does not go into 4, so I have to add a 0 up here before I can bring down my 8. 12 goes into 48 4 times, which equals 48. So my answer is 104. Now I need to take that decimal and bring it straight up into the answer. So my answer is 10 4/10. If I had not put my 0 here as a placeholder, I probably would have ended up with the answer 14, which would have been incorrect. Now, what happens if my divisor has a decimal? Let's go ahead and talk about that. Dividing by a decimal, I'm going to first move the divisor decimal to make a whole number, then move the dividend the same amount. So for our first example here, we're not going to solve anything yet. We're just going to move our decimals how we're supposed to. So it tells me to move the divisor decimal. The divisor, if you remember, is outside the box, and we're going to make it a whole number. So right now I have 2 4/10. In order to make this number a whole number, I need to move this decimal all the way to the right. And in order to do that, I'm in this case moving it 1 place. Now whatever I do to the outside with my decimal, I have to do to the inside. So now I end up with 336 divided by 24. Let's try this one. Again, my divisor is outside the box, so I have to move this decimal all the way to the right. In this case, it's 2 places over. So now I have the whole number 13. Whatever I do to the outside, I have to do to the inside. So I'm going to move it 1, 2. Well, if I move it over here, I don't have anything in this position, so I'm going to add a 0. So now I have 650 divided by 13. After you move the decimal, you're going to bring the decimal straight up and then divide. So if you remember when we had a whole number as our divisor and we didn't have to move the decimal at all, we just brought it straight up after we divided. You can actually bring it up before or after. Either way, it's still going to end up in the same place. So in the last step, we moved our decimal from the outside over to the right to make a whole number 24. We moved this number all the way to the right to make a whole number 336. Now we can divide. So 24 goes into 33 one time. That equals 24. I end up with 9 left over. Now I'm going to bring down my 6. 24 goes into 96. This one's kind of tricky. Well, 2, the first digit, goes into 9 4 times. So let's try 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 96. So I have 0 remaining. So my answer ends up being 14. Alright, so let's try our other example from the last page, and we're going to go ahead and remove our decimal again, just to make sure we remember that step. So we want our decimal all the way to the right. In this case, I moved it 2 places. So here, if I move it 2 places, I had to add that 0 for my placeholder. So now I can divide. 13 goes into 65. Let's try 5 times. I know that's kind of an estimate, but if you look here, 13 is pretty close to 15. And I know 15 times 2 is 30. Times 2 more is 60, so that's 4 total. And then we're going to go ahead and just round up. So 5 times 3 is 15. 5 plus 1 is 65. So we ended up correct. And then we bring down our 0. 13 goes into 0 times, and so that 0 goes there. Now, because this went in evenly and I have a whole number, I don't have to have my decimal up here. But if you move your decimal before you start dividing, it just helps to not forget it later. But just remember that you do need to make sure that you don't forget your decimal. Alright, let's try a couple more practice problems. So let's go ahead and write it out first. So the first number goes in the box, and we're dividing by 4. Since this 4 is a whole number, you don't need to move your decimal at all. So let's go ahead and bring the decimal in the problem straight up. And I'm going to let you pause the video and solve this one and then check it. Alright, let's go ahead and check your work. So 4 goes into 29 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. So I'm going to bring down, I have 1 left over, bring down my 5. 4 goes into 15 3 times, which equals 12. Then I have 3 left over, bring down a 0. Now, I didn't have to add a decimal before I added my 0 because I already have a decimal in this number. So you only have to add a decimal if there's nothing there and you want to keep going with a whole number. So now 4 goes into 30 7 times, which equals 28. I have 2 left over, bring down another 0, and 4 goes into 20 5 times. So this one ends up being 7 and 375 thousandths. So the other 2 problems that we did previously, we actually ended up having a whole number because the number went in evenly. But this one, you notice that I did need my decimal here because the number kept going quite a ways past that. Alright, on this next one, go ahead and set up the problem and then solve it. Go ahead and pause the video and play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, let's check your work. So the first number goes in the box, and I'm dividing by the second number. Now, this number outside is not a whole number, so I have to make it a whole number first. So 1 2 places to the right means this also has to move 2 places to the right, and then I'm going to put it straight up. Make sure you keep everything lined up. Now, 96 does not go into 14, so I'm going to put a 0 here. just as a placeholder and to make sure that I understand I'm keeping everything lined up. If you want to put zeros in these other spaces, or if you want to put an X, something to make sure that you remember that those places do not need anything, you can do that, but you don't have to. So now 96 goes into 144 one time. I'm going to subtract 96. So here I'm going to have to borrow. And I'm going to have to borrow again. That equals 8 and 4. So now I have 48, and I'm going to bring down a 0. Once again, I don't need to add a decimal before I have a 0 there because I already have a decimal in my problem. So let's go ahead and try 5. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 9 is 45, 46, 47, 48. So I end up with 480, which means my remainder is 0, and my answer is 1500ths. All right, we're going to go ahead and recap these steps here. So first, if you're dividing by a whole number, you want to divide and then move the decimal in the answer or the quotient the same amount of spaces as the dividend. So really you're just bringing your decimal straight up from where it is under the box. Second, if you're dividing by a decimal, we want to move the divisor decimal to make a whole number and then move the dividend the same amount. Once we move our decimals, we want to put the decimal straight up into the answer or the quotient, and then we're going to divide. So really, once your decimal is in place, whether you have to move it or not, after you've moved it, then you just bring the decimal straight up into your answer. So thanks for watching the video on how to divide decimals. I hope this was a good review for you, and if you still need help, make sure that you watch it a couple of times and then be ready to ask some specific questions. This is Mrs. D signing off on dividing decimals. I hope you have a great day. We'll see you in the next video. Bye!